Protests outside as the U.S. Supreme Court justices heard arguments in a case that could limit severely the access to abortion. This is the biggest case regarding abortion in decades and challenges the premise of Roe versus Wade.
The case stems from a Mississippi law, but it could have national implications. Joining us now to discuss this is UC Hastings Professor of Law, Rory Little. Professor, always great to have you on and get your expertise on this. The indications seem to be, from what the justices said during the questioning, was that they may be leaning toward upholding that Mississippi law. What's your reaction to what you heard?
Well, there were 2 hours of oral argument, which is pretty unusual, and it's pretty hard to see that there could be 5 votes to uphold Roe and Casey, which are the 2 cases upholding a woman's right to choose. So if there aren't 5 votes, then that means they could overrule those cases or so severely limit them that, in effect, they would distinguish them to death.
Justice Sotomayor made a statement that continues to be emphasized by people looking at what happened today, referring to, can the Supreme Court as an institution survive what she called the stench of this current situation? How do you feel about her comment, and do you think that it has merit? Is there reason to be concerned about how the institution survives?
Well, I do think that Sonia Sotomayor came out today to use a phrase loaded for bear. She seems to assume that they're going to overrule, and she just made every point that you could make. And she said our legitimacy depends on public acceptance. The public polls suggest that the right to abortion is supported by a large majority. How are we going to survive that as a legitimate institution? I think that's a very important question. I will say that if they were to overrule the cases, then there'd be a political backlash. And that's an interesting prospect. Like, what would the Democrats do? What would the federal Congress do in order to preserve a right to abortion? They could pass a federal law to federalize the right and take it away from the states. They could put more justices on the Supreme Court to counterbalance the Trump 3 justices. So the court needs to be careful about the backlash, not just from the public, but from the Congress.
There are a lot of political risks to that on both sides if that were to happen. Another interesting development or ongoing development is that there's 20-something other states that have trigger laws so that if the Supreme Court reverses Roe v. Wade or upholds the Mississippi law, that they'll immediately have that laws in effect in almost half the country.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's true that the country will be immediately divided into how a woman's right to choose is going to be treated when it comes to pregnancies. The most disturbing part of the argument today, I thought, was when Justice Amy Coney Barrett, the newest justice, a woman with 7 children, basically said that there are no burdens on women if you eliminate this right, because they can always just give up their babies to the custody of the state. That is a dehumanizing view of what a woman goes through when a woman is pregnant and forced by the state to carry that pregnancy to term.
Those opposed to the Mississippi law or any attacks on Roe, of course, often reference precedent, and they reference the whole thing about body integrity, I think is another phrase that we keep hearing as it pertains to Roe v. Wade in general. Help us understand. I mean, Roe has been around for almost 50 years. If something is precedent in law, what does that mean if it can be changed just by the change of the makeup of the court?
Well, I mean, it's a very good question, right? What is the effect of this doctrine we call in Latin stare decisis, which means let the decision stand unless you have a good reason to overrule it. Now, there's a famous example of overruling when the court in Brown versus Board of Education overruled a precedent called Plessy versus Ferguson, and they said, you know, it's separate is never equal. We're not going to have race discrimination in public institutions in this country. So there is an opportunity sometimes to overrule a case because people recognize that it's wrong. But that parallel doesn't really apply very well to this parallel. If for no other reason, then it took the Supreme Court years to overrule Plessy. They argued that case not just once, but twice over 2 years. This court should be more cautious about overruling a precedent that so many people have relied on for so many years.
And how could this affect future Supreme Court nominees going through their confirmation process when you had Justice Kavanaugh very clearly say that he supported precedent,
right,
and at the same time, in his oral argument, seemed to indicate that he was open to overturning this?
Yeah, well, everyone loves precedent until it's a case they don't like, and that's where Justice Kavanaugh is on that. You know, how this could affect the future of the Supreme Court is such a big question. One of the proposals is to add more justices to the court. If you can overrule today the Roe versus Wade case, and by the way, it's not done until an opinion comes out. That's going to happen in June, maybe. It's not going to happen tomorrow. So just wait until you see the opinion. But if you can overrule Roe versus Wade, then if you put more justices on the court, you can then overrule this case a year later, and we'll get into this kind of volleyball form of jurisprudence, which nobody wants. Nobody wants a Supreme Court that can't be depended on for reliable precedents.
So Professor, President Trump said that he was going to only nominate justices who would dismantle Roe. He did that when he had the opportunity to fill those seats. So the court is stacked, 6-3. Is that unusual? I mean, don't both parties do that when they're in power?
Well, certainly presidents try to choose justices that they believe are ideologically sympathetic to whatever the moment of the ideology may be. So it's not dissimilar. Remember, the Trump justices are somewhat illegitimate. You remember Merrick Garland was nominated by Obama, and had he been just given a fair hearing, he would have been confirmed, and we would have a different court today. He was denied that hearing. 4 years later, when a vacancy occurred and the presidential election was underway, the Republicans all shifted and said, oh, we're going to put Amy Coney Barrett on within 6 weeks of Justice Ginsburg dying. So the Trump justices are a particularly unusual historical moment, which is not common, even by presidents who pick people they think are with them.
Professor Rory Little from UC Hastings School of Law, thanks for your perspective. As always, we really appreciate it.
You do. Thank you.